Anba Braun partnered with Philippians Christian College. They visited our newly established center in Egypt, the King's Kids, bringing love, joy, and fellowship to our brothers and sisters. Visit our website to learn more about our mission and ways to support. Anba Braun Charity wishes you a happy Easter. Because of your generous support, opened 33 daycare centers, educated boys and girls in need, trained men and women to be self-sustainable, provided medical treatment to the sick, and provided resources to our brothers and sisters. On behalf of Anba Braun Charity,
thank you very much.
We appreciate your support. Thank you for your help.
Thank you for your support. Thank you very much.
Anba Braun partnered with Philippians Christian College. They visited our newly established center in Egypt, the King's Kids, bringing love, joy, and fellowship to our brothers and sisters. Visit our website to learn more about our mission and ways to support. Anba Braun Charity wishes you a happy Easter. Because of your generous support, opened 33 daycare centers, educated boys and girls in need, trained men and women to be self-sustainable, provided medical treatment to the sick, and provided resources to our brothers and sisters. On behalf of Anba Braun Charity,
Thank you very
والابن
much.
والروح القدس الإله الواحد أمين. تعالوا ناخد شوية أسئلة من مسيساوجا. صلاة المزامير اللي رتبتها الكنيسة ليها تأثير إيجابي على الحياة الروحية. إيه هو؟ ببساطة صلاة المزامير دي وجبة دسمة، زي ما بتغذي جسدك بأكلة شهية ودسمة. صلاة المزامير أكلة دسمة جدا ومليانة كالوريز روحية لأن فيها شكر.
Ask why questions, I have to revive the whole story of salvation.
To change their mindset, change the way they look at the world.
But ask yourself, if he were to give you his wisdom and knowledge too, you will leave everything as is.
Can think very quickly about something evil by nature unless I train it in light of Jesus' grace, of Christ our Lord's grace.
Related the sign of the beast to something, in the news.
Your answers for all the questions, either counseling, either
أنا
apologetics.
كان نفسي أشتغل مذيع وما نجحتش، فيعني سيبني أعمل الشغلة دي. Back to our discussion with Abuna Bshoy and George. I'm so happy. I'm enjoying the discussion. I'm considering Abuna Bshoy is always answering the how questions, how to deal with the problem. and how to deal with the complications of the COVID-19 concerning the relationships and the depression. And I'm also considering George for the why question, because he is such a good apologist. So let me ask you, George, why? Why this happened? That's a very simple, common question given by most of the young people. So what's behind the question of why?
Yes, it is true that this has been the question of all questions. And it takes many different shapes and forms. But at the root, people are asking why. Now, when I get questions as such, I like to turn the question back on the questioner. And I say, why are you asking the question why? I will refrain from discussing the theological explanation, and we have discussed this, and Utsabuna, you have discussed it beautifully last year, في سلسلة القضايا الساخنة, as to the wrath of God and the message from God. But I wanted to ask the questioner, why are you asking this question? There are only two reasons. The first reason you're asking the question why is for you to satisfy your intellectual curiosity. You just want to know for the sake of knowing, because you've been conditioned by your society and your culture to always gravitate to find answers to your questions. And Google and the internet had conditioned you to always get answers for your question. You just want to satisfy your curiosity, and you just want to know because you're entitled to know. The second reason why you may ask the question why is for you to discern the very personal message that God is sending to you. And you need to know which one of these, what is your intention for asking the question why? Is it just curiosity, or is it for you to discern the message? And I want to share with you on the screen a very interesting study that will show you how. I will share my screen here in 1 second. And I trust that you can see my screen now.
Yeah.
Okay. There's the 2/3, it says right here, oops. 2/3 of religious Americans believe coronavirus is a message from God. Now, and actually other studies, this is Forbes magazine, a very well-known magazine that had conducted a study that said 2/3 of religious Americans believe coronavirus is a message from God. So there is a message. It is not prudent or wise for you to be hung up looking for an explanation as to why. It's much more prudent for you to look forward for a purpose. What is the message that God is sending me so that I can learn from what is going on? That is the reason why you should be asking the question why. So I urge youth and adults together to not look back for an explanation, but look forward for a purpose. And I tell them, you know, the scripture says, he who has ears, let him hear. There is a message. Don't waste time looking for curiosity. Do not waste your time. Discern, learn from the message God is sending you.
Thank you.
Abuna, may I say something here? So, George, part of the reason why they ask the why question, or what do you think is some of the reasons behind the why question? Is it because they are seeking a purpose, or they're wondering about a purpose, or do you think because they're challenging faith?
Very good question. Yes, I think it's the latter, unfortunately, more so than the first, than the former. They're struggling with their conception of God. Again, back to what we had discussed earlier, God should not allow any evil to happen. God is such a loving God, and that's it. There's no justice, there's no holiness, there's no punishment, there's none of that. So I challenge this idea or my understanding of who God is. So when you see something like that, you begin, you get confused as to who this God is, and it's important for us to help them understand the infinite holiness and the infinite love of God.
Let
Also,
me add,
please, Abuna, please go ahead.
yeah, in my answer, I used to say, when I ask why questions, I have to revise the whole story of salvation. Who is God and why he created men, so I can answer the question of why this happening now. Because if I do not understand the attributes of God, if I do not understand why he created me, now I can never understand what's happening. But if I believe in God, the Almighty, the loving God, and he created myself out of his love to enjoy his fatherhood and to live with him forever. And because of my free will, now I choose to live away from God. And because of this suffering, death came to our nature. So I can now relate what's happening to the salvation story. So when we answer why questions, we can never ignore the truth. The truth is there, God is there, he is the creator, he is the controller, he is the pantocrator, and the purpose of our life to catch the kingdom of heaven, not to enjoy this transit life. Then I can answer now the question, because suffering is part of our life, and suffering again speaks for God's side, that he needs everyone to know him, to know God, and to catch the eternal life. So I can understand now the messages coming from the Corona.
If I may,
go ahead.
Go ahead, George.
I just wanted to add one more thing too, and I love how, Abuna, you tied this to our creation, our salvation, and so on. But another message I want to make sure that our youth understands is that we have limited perspective, limited ability to comprehend and to know. And this is very difficult. In this day and age, we live in an age called the age of knowledge. So we've been programmed to know everything. And then I don't want to get into artificial intelligence and so on and so forth, but this is the direction the world is going. So it is important for us to humble the intellectual strive of our youth and let them know that we don't know. And I say that even if God were to tell you at times, even if he were to tell you why, you may not even have the capability to understand. So one last thing is that I would contemplate on the power of God and say that if God were to give me his power for only one day, you will see how many things I will change in this world. Just give me your power. Imagine I have the power of God for one day or 1 hour, and I will fix a lot of things in this world. But ask yourself, if he were to give you his wisdom and knowledge too, you will leave everything as is.
Yeah.
In other words, we don't have the knowledge and the wisdom of God, and we think God could have done better. That's what I wanted to add.
Yeah.
I just wanted to comment there. I really liked how you ended this, because I think it's important that part of our answer includes the fact that God is God and we are creatures. And
Yes.
this is not escaping from answering the question. But it is a very important aspect to realize that God is Almighty and we are limited, and that in itself is a fact. Yet we are limited is a fact. And I really like the verse from Romans chapter 11, verse 33. How great are God's riches and wisdom and knowledge, how impossible it is for us to understand his decisions and his ways. And like in psychotherapy, for example, the why question is not a good question. We don't use the why question, because why question either means could convey blaming, why did you do this? Why? So we ask the what question. What led you to do that versus why did you do this? And also the why questions assumes that I know everything, and the reality that we all agree to, we don't know it.
So in our Christian worldview, the why questions, we should refer to the Bible. We should refer to the truth revealed. We cannot put our answers because we do not have the full knowledge. That's why we are answering on behalf of God. He told us this. So now we are telling people that's the story given by God. God created men, and we are here because of His will, because of His love, and His purpose is to take us to heaven. So now we can understand it through God's will. Abuna Bishoy, when we speak about children nowadays, usually we have problem with parenting. Because, children have an anxiety like the adults, or maybe more, because of the news everywhere and every now and then. But, people or parents do not understand the misbehavior of their children, and they cannot relate it to an anxiety. How would you advise us and all parents to deal with these misbehaviors of the children?
When I want to start with something funny, the misbehavior happens from the adults, not just from the children. In this case, when people are stressed, there is the child within, the immature person within, that comes out. Again, one of the views of people is that every adult is a child, is an adult, is a parent. Because as a child, there's part of the old me that still is there. The way I stomp my feet, the way I rebel back, the way I shout back, maybe even the way I use violence. This is an act of a child. The adult is the person who's able to use God's gifts, the rational soul that we have and the rationality that we have, in order to calmly handle whatever situation they're in. The parent is usually the one who wants to fix everything and wants to tell, whoever is wrong wants to tell and point at who is wrong. And the common use of the finger is this is the parent in me coming out. And so everyone is affected by the COVID-19 outbreak. It's a stressful matter. And fear and anxiety, as we spoke earlier, they can overwhelm parents. They can also overwhelm children. So we get children, everyone reacts. And a child does not have the social skills we as adults have. That develops over time. It's part of the developmental stages of humans. So a young child, a young boy or a young girl, they don't have those skills. They're still learning them. So what ends up happening is different people react to stress, or different types of children, different children, they will react differently to stress. One person will become very hyper. Another person could be very active. A third child will be very, very into themselves and very quiet and has this hazy look on them. They're kind of lost. But it's actually anxiety, and it's happening inside of them, and no one is helping them open up. That type of child is at a worst situation a little bit, because people might think, or parents might think, that the child is okay. He's fine. He's been coping really well, but he's been spending more time alone in his or her room, or they haven't been talking to us as much. I mean, these are signs that as parents, I have to open up my child. I have to care for my child, not only to care by providing a meal on the table and a place to sleep and gifts when gifts are needed, but to care for them spiritually and psycho-spiritually, to open them up. And like I said, some of the children, they just cocoon. They go and they get so enclosed into themselves. Others become aggressive, and even others become impulsive. Some children begin to speak too much and very quickly and very fast, And parents, if they're paying attention, they'll say, oh, this is not my child. Something is weird. Something is different. And it's usually the early signs that there is an anxiety happening with the child. Another thing that parents may not be aware of is the time overnight when everyone is sleeping. Some children actually wake up and they pace in the room back and forth, and they get very they get very worried about what's going on, but they don't talk, they don't open up. So it's good as a parent to always check with my child and with all my children, how are things going? And that's why we were saying earlier that a nice round table discussion on what's going on and what are the kids seeing and how are they interacting, and not to be afraid to ask the question straight up. How are you doing with this COVID-19 thing? What have you heard from your friends? What's going on your phone and the social media? Because anxiety and fear are contagious. If COVID-19 is contagious, it is nothing compared to anxiety and fear. If the mom has it, the whole house will feel it. If the dad has it, everyone will catch it. We say you catch anxiety like people would catch a common cold. But different people will react differently. So it's important that we don't look at our children's behavior or label it as misbehavior. This is their way, their outlet, the way they are expressing themselves. And we have to be very patient with them, and we have to open them up and have a discussion. I pray, really, Abuna, because I say this, I don't want to be pessimistic, but a lot of parents, they try and, they get nowhere in talking, but maybe because the questions are not the right questions, or maybe because the child is not used to the parent asking. And I also say many parents do not talk to their kids. They consider their role to be, to provide for them in terms of their day-to-day needs, physical needs, foods, and so on. But there is much more care that needs to happen on the psychological level. Children, as Otsek and George are very well aware, especially I'm talking those who are grade 6, 7, they vape. Vaping, the electronic cigarettes, is very common amongst grade 6, 7, and 8, and also adolescents, but more so the younger age. And some of them are actually, they're seeing an increase in vaping. I was just talking to someone yesterday that we were discussing statistics and the rise in the use of vaping amongst youth and children, and the rise of use of alcohol and tobacco because of the current situation, and the use of weed. So all these things, they use weed, may not be necessarily, they're misbehaving, even though it's a bad behavior, but they are trying to cope with anxiety, but they're doing it the wrong way. And so all these are signs and things that should lead us as parents to pay attention, to open up conversation, to even speak about these things with our children, and not to be afraid. Some parents are afraid that if I say these things to my children, I'm giving them ideas. It is not the case. But it actually brings them and draws them out to speak up and handle their anxiety in better ways.
Thank you, Buna. George, if someone comes to you saying, I will denounce God because of the evil in this world, so how would you deal with this guy?
Yes, a question that comes all the time. The problem of evil and suffering, as some historians, sociologists have labeled it, the rock of atheism. That's the rock of atheism. Most atheists use this as their justification for their disbelief in God. But I also, and again, as you've seen me use this tactic all the time, is that when they ask me, how can I believe in a God that allows all this and the evil in this world? I want to denounce this God and I don't want to believe in him anymore. I say, well, what's your alternative? What's your solution? As an atheist, there's no explanation for evil. And more importantly, there's no solution for evil. So what's your solution as an atheist? When I ask questions like this to an atheist, they say, this is life. That's it. You know, we live and die, and that's it. But then I ask you then another existential question, emotional question. I say when the storms of life hit, when you are struck with a disease, let's say the coronavirus, then you took away one very important element that you need to survive, and that is the element of hope, or the virtue of hope. Without God, you become hopeless. And that's why, statistically speaking, and I would love to share with you these statistics, that the suicide rate is much higher in non-faith-based communities, at least here in America. The suicide rate, the rate of alcoholism, the rate of spousal abuse, all of these things are significantly much higher for those who have no hope, because you don't have a God that will grant you this hope. And there's a lot more to be said. I just wanted to be concise with my response.
Thank you, George. Abuna, when we move to the teens, sometimes we find teens are suffering from loneliness, sadness, and kind of signs of depression. How to deal with these teens, and they are shouting at their parents, and they have some aggressive behaviors, and most of our Coptic parents fail to deal with the teens wisely.
So, Abuna, teens, as your reverence just said, they are rebellious, and we know that by nature, and they hate rules, or they don't really easily accept rules. They need to be convinced of a rule, and they need, when they deal with someone in authority, to have earned, that person must have earned their place in authority with them. So in some cases it's just hard, and parents have to reset the way they talk to their teen, the way they speak with their teen. But it is a difficult situation, because the dynamic between the parent and the teen has been going on for years.
Yeah.
So it's always good to break this cycle. And sometimes we need help. Sometimes the intervention of someone, if a person is depressed and the parents have noticed that they've tried to talk and there hasn't been much success, it may be good to involve Abuna to speak, like the father of confession, to speak to the teen, to open him or her up, to understand what's going on. And it's usually about a rush of negative thoughts. And sometimes the teen is not aware of them. They just live the feeling that is born of the thought, but they're not aware of what these thoughts are. A parent may, in discussing with their teens, help them go through that. So what are you thinking? What is bothering you? What is the thought that is causing you the greatest sadness? What are you sad about? And sometimes in that conversation, often actually what happens is the teen will begin to speak some of what's going on in their minds and open up. But it's not an easy process, and some Abuna, they do require to go for teletherapy right now, like therapy over the internet, and speak to a counselor, especially if they've been depressed for longer, or they had predisposition for depression, and now because of COVID-19 and the isolation, it kind of pushed them over the edge of the normal depression into maybe some sort of clinical depression. But I also see the spiritual part very, very important. So I've seen, for example, many teens who have said to me lately, because of COVID-19, their parents have started to pray with them from the Ashbeya, when they never used to do that. And they tell me, Abuna, a few teens who spoke to me, they said, Abuna, it actually makes me feel a lot better. It just gives me peace. I know the problem is still there, but something about my parents encouraging us to pray, even if it's once a week, it has made a difference, because we never really used to have that support. Loneliness, again, Abuna, not only because they're lonely, not seeing their friends, but as Otzak was speaking earlier, sometimes when the parents don't understand the teen feels even lonelier. They feel within their own family, and their family is not understanding them. So they go further into their cocoon, and their cocoon of anxiety has that sister that likes to be there, called depression. and feeling down. Also, I think we mentioned this earlier, but a lot of the teens are sleeping long hours, very long hours. And this is definitely something that can contribute in a negative way towards depression. So again, having a schedule for the teen, helping the teen formulate a new schedule, giving them chores to do, and commending them for what they've done, helping them helping them understand they're significant even when their friends are not around them telling them you're good or you're significant. Yes. Because we know that there are primary needs for teenagers. One of them is significance. Significance comes from when I do something and it's working. And even adults need significance. And the other thing that they need is they need to feel valued. And this is something that happens in the comments that parents say to their teens. And they also need to feel secure. And security is such an important thing. They need to feel secure physically. So a teen may be very worried about social distancing, maybe, but the parents are not paying attention to that. So that contributes, again, more to the teens' worriness and depression and loneliness and so on. They're not on the same page, so they're lonelier. Yeah. Or, for example, if the parents are not discussing what's going on, all the teen can see is that the parents are either fighting, upset, angry, shouting, and they come up with their own scenario in their own mind as to what the problem might be, and these scenarios are not good. They are very depressing and very hopeless. What's going on with my parents? They're fighting even more, and so on and so forth. So involving them in doing things, connecting also maybe with other families. One of the things I suggested, Abuna, is to have a happy hour every day. A happy hour. During this hour, it's just a time to not talk about COVID-19. Yeah. It's just completely throw COVID-19 out of that 1 hour and talk about something else as if COVID-19 is not there.
I want to hear also George's opinion about the teens. I believe that in our Sunday school teaching, we should put the apologetic lessons for the teens, because many of them are suffering doubts, and they are into reasoning and they do not find enough reason to answer the common question. And I guess this is one part of their anxiety, because they couldn't answer the common questions. Do you think of making some books or videos for the teens?
Definitely, Abuna. Definitely, Abuna. That's it's not a suggestion. I believe it's a must. Given the abundance of questions, especially in this day and age, Abuna, and I'm sure Utsak and Abuna Bisho, you have a plethora of questions coming at you, and I've always said that I hear this directly from youth. All ages, from little kids all the way to 25, 35, that the problem they face is that they have no resources to go to get good, solid, Christian-based, Orthodox answers to their questions. And when they ask some of, forgive me to say this, but I'll say it, some of their parents or some other adults, they still don't have or don't get a fulfilling answer to the age they live in, which is the age of I don't want to say the age of reason, but the age of reason with me, communicate with me, and don't just give me the faith that we call blind faith without conversations and discussions. So for sure we must augment our Sunday school curriculums with apologetics, and we have been recently we have been doing some work. And hopefully we'll broadcast this work to all the archdioceses and the dioceses in the US and Canada, God willing.
Very good. By the way, I suggest for the teens another two main points, that the teachers or the servants of Sunday school serving this age should be knowledgeable in counseling and also apologetics, because I believe some of the servants should do the work of a group counseling or group therapy, because as Abuna were saying, many of them now suffering anxiety and depression, and the parents cannot help it. So the servants has something to do, in my opinion. And if they know how to let these young people ventilate and speak it out and express their feelings, they will save them many bad things. So Abuna Bishoy, do you suggest for the future kind of training the servants, especially working with the teens, to have these little tips of counseling?
Abuna Otsak, you're aware that we have the youth ministry certification program. I spoke to Otsak about this one. It's been running for about 9 years now, and we make it a prerequisite in our diocese for our church, and a recommendation for other churches that send their servants before they enter into youth ministry. They have to take 7 courses, and one of these main courses focuses on counseling and skills of counseling. This last year, we sent actually one of our servants to take a master's degree in counseling, so that he can be also part of the training and expand on that. So I agree 100%, and I think it is necessary, not necessarily for them to become counselors, but to have counseling skills, so that they can interact with the children in healthier ways and help them manage and maneuver through emotional problems or issues like depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, and the like.
Another suggestion I would suggest for the teen services, that we should invent new kinds of services that they can share or be engaged in this service. Because when we wait till the uni age in order to start serving, we lose thousands of these young teens because they have lots to do and they wish to be like servants, and we don't have any form of services related to their age. So we have a really big problem in this. And I hope all the church work on this, inventing forms related to the new services for this age.
Abuna, can I ask? Can I say something to George? George, I am glad that you said that there's work happening on apologetic curriculum, and I've heard that in other Western dioceses that there is a new curriculum that came out, and maybe I don't know if this is going to be part of it or it's something separate. My point, or what I'm requesting, is that the curriculum is not just the material.
Yeah.
The curriculum is training the people to deliver the material. So we also, if possible, we need train the trainer. Type of material. How do we equip and train our servants, the people serving the youth, how to deliver the material?
Yes. And I think how to deliver the material is equally as important as the content itself. And I agree with you, Abuna, wholeheartedly.
Thank you.
George, what shall I do now as a Christian when it comes to this problem and the outbreak of COVID-19, and people are all anxious? So now the question of what shall I do as a real Christian, and a man of God, what should I do now?
As a Christian, I need to look at my role in this world, my purpose in this world, and I should not only be a recipient, a receiver, but I should also be a giver, a transmitter. So yes, it is important for me to ask for God's joy, God's comfort, God's peace, and so on and so forth. But that's half the truth. Now, I love the verses of St. Paul, and forgive me if I were to mention just one verse. St. Paul, when he says in Romans 15, he says, "May the God of hope fill you with all hope and joy. ليملأكم إله الرجاء بكل فرح وسرور. So what does fill you mean? Fill you here is that I'm filled. And how do I know that I am filled? I mean, if I get a cup of water and I fill it with water, how do I know that this cup is completely filled? When it overflows. So I should be, as a Christian, in the midst of this coronavirus pandemic, I shouldn't just be saying, give me God your peace and comfort, but I should be an instrument of peace and comfort and joy to everyone around me. So that when people see me, they get comforted. When they talk to me, they get joy and they get peace. So I think it's important for us as Christians, youth and adults alike, not to be passive in asking for the grace of God and the peace of God, which is great, but also ask so that you may be able to transmit. Now, you're not giving your peace or your comfort. Of course, you're giving the peace and the comfort from the source. The world needs us as Christians to have hope and comfort. If we don't give comfort and hope to this world, who will? We have the source. We're the transmitters. So I urge, like I said, youth and adults alike, to think actively, not just passively. So I would pray and say, fill me, God, so that I can transmit and help others with this comfort and joy. They so desperately need our involvement in this world in a positive way, because we're the only ones who can give that.
Yeah, and this I will add, in our Sunday school teaching, we used to push our young people to stay away from the world and to keep themselves isolated from non-believers, and kind of having this defense attitude all the time. And in this, I think it's against the purpose and the will of God, because we are the light of the world, we are the salt of the earth. Teaching about the mission in life is very poor in our church, and that's my idea, that we rarely speak about evangelizing Christ and heaven, serving the community. We are not into this, especially in Egypt. We are into always caring for our Christian families and serving the poor in our churches, caring for the young people, but we never care for the outsiders. We don't have this in our schedule, in our programs. So I wish we add this missionary line on all our sermons and all our teaching. What's your opinion, Abuna Bshoy, about this?
Actually, Abuna, it's very interesting that I hear Otzak say that, because yesterday I was giving a talk in a few days I was giving a talk in the Evangelism course online, and we talked about what is known as borderland. Borderland is basically, Abuna, that piece of land where two countries meet. And when you look at some borderlands, you find that people are mixing. And in evangelism happen in the borderland. Does not happen in one's own individual separate. It's in the border, it's in the context where the circles overlap. And Otzak always teaches about evangelism. And yesterday we were specifically saying, Christ has not called us to build fortress mentality churches. زي الحصن كده. ونروح قافل البريدج. لما يكون في attack of barbarians, we'd go in and close. But God has in Matthew 28 said, go and make disciples. We are what is referred to as the go church, not the stay inside church, the go church. So I think it's in the way parents parent their children as well. It's a whole cultural shift, in my opinion, Abuna. The whole way of us thinking inside the church and inside our homes must radically change. If we are not to be afraid that our children interact with non-Christians, I'm not saying make them best friends. I'm not saying put them into the inner circle, because some people think, how can I do that? And then bad company corrupts good behavior. but we're saying not to be afraid because he who is in us is greater than he who is in the world. If I can bring up my child with the strength of an evangelist, that my child will be what the world will fear.
Yeah, I think, Abuna, it's also related to the level of confidence, because we may teach about humility, but we never focus on self-confidence. Some people are afraid of this self-confidence to be like pride against the humility. But actually, if I am not confident in myself, in my faith, I will never preach, I will never speak about God. I will never answer the strong questions. And back to George, by the way, George, I felt that those who studied apologetics got some higher level of confidence. Do you believe in this? With the study of apologetics, do you feel like your students starting to have kind of self-confidence?
Absolutely, because now you are equipped.
Yeah.
And that is the most important thing. You cannot, first of all, you cannot defend a faith that you don't know.
Yeah.
So when you get anchored, راسخ في الإيمان بتاعك تقدر تدافع عنه.
Yes,
But
exactly.
I just wanted to add one more thing also back to the subject of being a transmitter, not only a receiver. In addition to evangelism, because I don't want to just focus on evangelizing non-believers, even with our Christian brothers and sisters. I've gotten so many phone calls and emails of people that are so stressed and depressed. And as Christians, we need to instill hope. So practically speaking, someone calls me and says, the coronavirus this is the end of the world, things are going to get worse. Look at the stock market, look at the financial situation. What is my response? My response is, oh yeah, it's going to get worse? Or is my response, we have to have hope in our Lord, things will get better? Always be a good news transmitter, even within our brother, not exclusively to the non-believer.
Thank you, George. Abuna, speaking about stresses, can you give us some simple ways how to cope with these stresses?
Sure, Abuna. If I may just add one thing to the stress and anxiety that we talked about earlier, how children react in a way that sometimes parents mislabel them as having a bad behavior or a misbehavior, or with their teens when they rebel and they push and they talk less and they dismiss their parents because they're stressed and not able to cope with it and they feel lonely and all that. Parents tend to begin to add rules and become stricter and punish. And when that happens, more of that creates more of the problem that the teens and the children are having, and they become more stressed, more isolated, more lonely, more rebellious, and then the parents react with more punishments and more rules, and it becomes a perpetual self-feeding negative cycle. And if it continues happening, it becomes a chronic cycle and harder to deal with. And that's why the earlier a parent hopefully can listen to this and can work it out differently, break the cycle, and begin another positive cycle with simply listening. That's positive. Giving their teens space. That's another positive introduction to a new cycle. Give them their space, respect their privacy. All this can also be part of helping a teen or children or families cope with stress. I'm going to mention a few things. Taking a break. Abuna, even sometimes people who are serving, they don't take a break.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, they burn out and they're not able to serve, or they're not able to keep up with their spiritual disciplines. Yeah. And once that's depleted, everything falls apart. Yeah. So I'm saying that to highlight that taking a break is not just a matter of psychological. It's not a psychological benefit only, but it's also a spiritual benefit as well. I'm not sure if Abuna is still there with us.
Yeah.
Abuna's here. Abuna's here.
Yeah.
Okay. So taking breaks from watching or reading or listening to news stories, and including obviously social media, it's something that is important. And a lot of the following the news is happening in silence, and it's happening in isolation that even the family is not aware of, as I said earlier. But having a roundtable discussion is important. Another thing I wanted to cope with stress is to take care of one's own body. And we know that the body is a gift from the Lord. We know that He has entrusted us with taking care of our body in a healthy and appropriate, balanced way. So, doing some breathing in and out, going out for a walk, meditating, reflecting on the Word of God every morning, for example, trying to eat a healthier diet. I know these are things that some people say, oh, this is not spiritual. I believe it's very spiritual because it is a proper way of taking care of oneself. Also exercising regularly. And I know some cultures do not have this as part of their day-to-day thing. But yeah. I even remember my grandfather in Egypt, he used to walk a lot. And people back in the day, they used to walk to church, even if it's a little bit of a distance. So walking, exercising, any mental, there's a lot of mental benefits to aerobic exercising because of the chemicals inside the body that change. And just exercising and being able to stay healthy is important. Getting enough sleep, but not too much sleep. And also avoiding the use of substance, alcohol and drugs. We would like to think that no one is using them. Reality is many are abusing them and using them and hurting because of them. Making time to unwind. So try to do some other activities that a person enjoys. And these activities, as I mentioned earlier, Abuna, some have found service to be a beautiful activity where they deliver things to people's homes, or they call people and ask about them, new activities, connecting also with others. And this could happen over Zoom or over like a certain platform on the net. Some people even just go and connect face-to-face with the social distance being kept, the social distancing guidelines being kept, and being innovative in one's daily activities, day-to-day activities. Otzak would recall that we said one needs to change their mindset. But one of the nice exercises a person can do is to become more grateful. So to think about the positives and the good things that they have and that are happening in their lives. That's, again, it throws them into a positive cycle in the mind. Controlling what they can control and not controlling and not fussing or being anxious about that which is not under their control, making a schedule for their day, practicing self-care. Again, as Otzak was saying about self-confidence, sometimes people think, okay, we need to be humble. That means we need to neglect to be self-confident or confident in the self that God has created in us. And the line is very hazy. And many of the self-confident activities that people can do can be misunderstood as prideful. But there are self-care. I need to care for me in a proper Christian way, so that there is a me who can care also for others. And I always tell people, God said, love others or love your neighbor as you love yourself. So there's no neglect to care for oneself. And I said earlier, and I added here as well, Abuna, create a happy hour or a time where people are encouraged to do something that they enjoy and like, and it is not involving COVID-19.
Thank you, Abuna. Allow me to add some spiritual points, as you always preach. Praying Psalms and praying Jesus' prayer, and reading the Bible and studying the Bible, memorizing many passages from the Bible, focusing on the promises of God, sharing the good word given in the Bible with others. This will help us to get out of the stress in a spiritual way. Definitely the psychological and physical ways are very much needed, because one should have the balance for all the functions of his life. Speaking to George, George, some people may see the COVID-19 problem now is related to the evolution, and they may think that evolutionists may say that's another proof for their theory that a virus can be, came out of like nothing without a designer, or so they may, speak this language, and many of our young people are doubting the idea of whether we were created, we were evoluted species, different than man. So what do you say in this?
Yes, that's a good question. Well, there are two things I want to share with you. First of all, the evolution itself. Now we're speaking to a cross-type evolution, also known as macroevolution. Now, if this virus is your proof that evolution does indeed occur, well, you need to prove to me that this virus came out of nothing. That's number one. Did it come out of nothing, or did it not? You have to make that proof for you to back your argument that evolution does occur. That's number one. Secondly, and very quickly, before I even respond to your claim that evolution is the answer to the question how we came about, how we exist, and so on and so forth, I'll tell you the four things that you, as an evolutionist or someone who's a proponent to the evolution theory, 4 questions that you do not have answers for. First of all, evolution does not explain the origin of this universe. And even Charles Darwin himself and his disciples after him could not answer the question to where the universe came from. Number 2, evolution could not adequately respond to the question, where did life come from? And Darwin himself, in his book, The Origin of Species, and others, could not find adequate, intellectually satisfying answers to this question. Thirdly, evolution cannot explain your objective morality. And that's very timely with the COVID-19 virus and the evil in this world, so they claim. Evolution cannot say this is evil and this is good. Because if it's evolution, then it's part of this nature. It's just the nature taking its course. As a matter of fact, we are molecules in motion. We are robots. So why do you call this evil? Where is this standard based on which you say this is good and this is, there's no standard. And if I make up this standard, then my standard is different than yours, and who is to say this is evil? So you cannot claim by on the worldview of evolution, you cannot claim that this is evil or any objective morality. Lastly, evolution, and more existentially, cannot give you the meaning of life that you so desperately need to continue on living. And with that meaning of life, we can include the element of hope, the element of the future beyond the grave, and so on and so forth. So evolution is silent on these 4 questions. I would say answer those 4 questions, and then we can have a conversation.
Thank you, George. Thank you. Abuna, the families are now facing many challenges because of COVID-19. They cannot predict the future schooling and the future career and the future relationships, and how long we will stay in this lockdown situations. So how can the family work it out and deal with these challenges and make use of the good opportunities?
Abuna, as much as there are challenging things that are happening, there are also very, very good opportunities that if we miss them, I don't know when again will we be able to benefit from such opportunities. Challenges, we all see them. People are isolated when they were used to being crammed and meeting, and lots of families visiting other families, and people in the mall, and people just not finding time for themselves, but they're really engaged with other people. But now they're isolated. There is financial challenge. There are financial challenges. Mm-hmm. People wondering, how are we going to make it a month after another? And some people's businesses have completely shut down, and they don't know how to pay their bills, and so on and so forth. There are also school challenges. Students, Abuna, yani our students here were not at all equipped or ready for, I'm talking high school students, for online learning. Yeah. Online learning does not happen in high school, rarely ever. The university people, yes, they may have some online courses, but for high schoolers and elementary children, this is all new to them. So there is a challenge there as well. Many other challenges, just dealing with change itself is the biggest challenge. A person might say, I'm not used to this, and that's why I'm anxious. I'm not used to this, I'm sad. Mm-hmm. The reality, or the other side of the coin, is that there are some amazing opportunities here. And I don't mean, when I speak of opportunities, to dismiss the challenges, but I'm saying there are opportunities because of the challenges. For example, the way we have been spending, Abuna, has been under review right now. Yeah. Some people have realized that they've overspent for many years. And I'm not talking about the people who cannot even find the month-to-month payments for their stuff. But I'm saying for a lot of the people, they've realized, this is how much money we spent on coffee. This is how much money we used to waste, and so much food we used to waste. So like George was saying, a good coach seeing his team not playing well in the game calls for a timeout and calls them back and says, listen, this is not working out. Let's change things around. Yeah. So the timeout is not a punishment. It's a perspective. One can see it as a punishment, but the players understand it is a good reset. It's an opportunity to listen to someone who's seeing the whole picture.
And you can only get few of them a game. Sorry to interrupt you, but you only get 3 or 4. That's it.
Yes, and you risk losing the entire game. And as we say that, everyone obviously is hearing the game is life. The coach is God. The players are us. The way we're playing the game needed to change somehow. So the opportunity of managing our finances better, the opportunity of remembering the poor people. Some people during this time, Abuna, have become very generous with their giving because they have realized that there are people in very bad situation. Yeah. So there's an opportunity to take the blessing of helping others. Also the opportunity for service, the opportunity for families. Here's the challenge and the opportunity. Families were not used to being in each other's face for a long time. That's the challenge. The opportunity is to form stronger ties and bonds and to begin to connect at a deeper level in the very family that I decided to live the rest of my life with. And I haven't paid the attention necessary, and I was successful everywhere else, but my family needed me back to come back, or needed the mother to come back, or needed the children to be plugged back for recharge. So there's an opportunity for stronger family ties. There are opportunities for quality time. There are opportunities for faith to develop. When is faith going to develop if everything is going well? When is it going to be tested, and when is it going to grow? So there are challenges, but these challenges, if we flip them, we will see that they are opportunities for I think maturity and a better way of handling life and playing the game.
Thank you, Abuna. George, can you give us some little advices how to start reading or studying things related to reasoning and apologetics? How should we start as servants, as parents, as young people? Because everyone will face atheism, everyone will face doubts in his life, and all those who are happily evangelizing, they have to be empowered with these answers and reasons. So from where should we start?
Yeah, very good question, Abuna, and I would love that for all our parents and youth to equip themselves. First of all, there are different types of literature or resources, rather, not just literature, resources, videotapes, YouTube, videos, and so on and so forth. There are different types depending on your interest level. So there are apologetic resources that speak to someone who is a thinker, a philosopher. There are apologetic resources that speak to someone who is more of the emotional, the existential. Another resources that speak to someone who is a scientist, and so on and so forth. So first and foremost, you must look within yourself and see what is the resource or the reference that you can latch onto and learn from. They all lead to the same thing. They all lead to the same arguments, but they're packaged differently. So if I am a thinker and a philosopher, and I read something that only deals with emotions and feelings and sentiments, I may not find it very satisfying. So I may just turn this video off or close this book. So first of all, see where what stimulates you in yourself, and then I shared with you, and I think last year, I believe it's going to have some references, and I'd be more than happy to share with you again additional ones, new ones,
yes, please,
that we can broadcast to everyone, and I will group them. If you want reasoning and thinking, these are the references. If you want something that speaks to the heart, these are the references and resources. But keep in mind, they all merge together in equipping you as not so much to become an apologist. Just like Abuna Bishoy said, we don't need to all be evangelists, but at least I'm equipped so that I can speak intellectually and intelligently with my children.
George,
So
we all need
more
to
than
be
happy to share this.
evangelists.
I'm sorry,
George, we all need to be evangelists. We don't need to be counselors.
Counselors.
Oh, forgive me. I meant to say, you're right, Yabuna. Thanks for correcting me. You're right. We need to be, yes, evangelists and apologists, but at least here's what I wanted to say, not to be subject matter experts.
Yeah.
Yes.
We don't need to be the experts in a given field in apologetics. I'll stick to apologetics, okay? But we need to at least have a good understanding of what is it that is, and also additionally, Abuna, I would like to say that it's important not only to know my faith and what I stand on, what I believe in as far as evolution, as far as the existence of God, the problem of evil, the scriptures, the resurrection. Not only that, but it's equally important to know the current arguments that are going on in this world. In other words, it's good to know the weapon that I have and the enemy I'm fighting against.
Yes,
so the way to do this is to ask your children questions and push them. If you know what I mean, ask them, have you ever thought of this? Have you ever doubted that? There's nothing wrong to have these questions to our children, because they do think these questions, they just are too afraid maybe, or too embarrassed or too shy to bring them out in the open. So you, as a wise parent and servant, do not wait for them, but go and become more assertive and proactive in asking questions.
Thank you, George. Abuna Bishoy, what's your advice for the servants nowadays to do because they cannot meet their children Sunday school, they cannot meet the youth in their youth meetings, and they don't have a chance to go for activities or conferences or retreats. So many of the servants stopped doing anything, saying until the lockdown, finish, let's think what to do next. So what's your advice? We can do things now, right?
Yes, Abuna. Many of the servants actually, Abuna, have realized something that we have been talking about a lot, which is individual personal service. This is the time for it.
Yes.
Before, many servants used to just text their youth because then they see them face to face at church. Now servants have been encouraged and actually are finding it better to call, to FaceTime the youth. And many of them, I was just telling Abuna about this. One person texted me on the WhatsApp group for the servant and said, Abuna, is it possible to have some gifts for outreach from the admin room in the church? Well, church is locked. We don't open the admin room. And I said, sure, if you are going outreach, I can prepare for you something that you can take. And many servants requested. We reached more than 180 gifts, which meant, and I know this, 180 visits happened in a matter of 10 days, a week to 10 days. And what the servants did, they used to fear going to visit at home. They're not used to it. They sit, they don't know what to say. They need the training, and they need, how do I do outreach? But with just going at the door, leaving something and stepping, 6 feet away and talking to their youth, they loved it. And their youth loved it. So there's still opportunity for personal outreach. There's still opportunity for speaking individually and focusing on the relationship that exists. Less emphasis on the topics, but they still do the weekly topics. They still do the weekly talks. Now they do tasbihah together. We were just arranging a group of classes are meeting together to do tasbihah. Now they're praying the compline prayer, Abuna, with them at 9:30 p.m. every night. Maybe not all the youth, of course, are attending, but none of them used to attend anyways. On a daily basis. So there are opportunities for that. They're even thinking of doing games with them, and they do trivia. They do Bible trivia and Bible study. Bible study online began in and around March 20th, after everything closed down. We began to have competitions of Bible study. Again, not many youth attend, but before, compared to now, more people are doing Bible study, more people are connecting with the servants. So there is room definitely for individual service and opportunities for people to be personal.
Thank you, Abuna. George, my last question. You are a youth servant and a father for some teens, children. So what do you do with the media addiction problem? Because it's everywhere that the young people are addict nowadays to games, to the media, to the Instagram, to whatever. So how can you deal with this problem in your house and also in your service?
Yes, Abuna, that's a very good question, and I wish I have a magic wand that would fix this problem, personally speaking, because I do have a 15-year-old and an 11-year-old. As a matter of fact, they're here with me upstairs, and I'm afraid they're going to listen to what I'm going to say. Anyways, yes, I think Abuna mentioned it. Abuna Bishoy mentioned it early, and I loved it, and I took some notes on it. Is having structure is the most important thing you can do. One of the important things you can do for your teens, especially during this COVID-19 lockdown. Structure, including screen time. So we now know that we have screen time built in our mobile devices that will measure how long you've been on this screen, how long you've been on that screen, and you can actually control that yourself. What I do, I'll tell you practically what I do. We have our family of 4. We have each an individual account, Microsoft account, and then we have allotted screen time per day, per week, per hour of the day. And then we've also allotted game time. In other words, within all the applications in this computer, you can only do 20 minutes of this application, 30 minutes of this game, and so on and so forth. So initially, there was some resistance, for sure. But after the first few days, this became part of the routine. So I don't want to go on the extreme and say, forget the screen altogether, because this is their life, and we have to accept that. Maybe it's difficult for us. Maybe it bothers us so much that they are using screens, whether phones or iPads or monitors on computers, but that's their life. My son now has online learning, and he's in high school, and he does his homework and his everything on the computer. So I have to accept that and don't let that bother me, because my children will know that you're triggered by this. But instead of letting it bother you, control it in agreement with your child. So structure and communication with your child. And also what my wife and I did, I'll tell you also honestly, is that we've had a very honest conversation with my children on the effects of media. And they're old enough now, and 15 and 11, they're old enough to understand and comprehend that when we control their exposure to media, it is not because we just want to control them. It's because we love them. And we need to share that with them in a loving way and actually engage with them and tell them, what do you think? And have more like a dialogue and an agreement, because gone are the days when you say, this is it, whether you like it or not. You're actually playing fire if that's what you're doing, because once they go out to college, see you later. Yeah. But having this dialogue and agreement, having structure, explaining to them the negative effects of media are very, very important, practical ways you can control that exposure.
Thank you, George. Abuna Psoy, I love to hear you in this question of the media addiction. I think you see many cases of these addicts, young people.
Yes, Abuna, and it does contribute to the rise of depression as well.
Yeah,
because yes. It gets them very enclosed and into a virtual reality, because really I'm talking about games specifically. Online gaming is not the Atari that we were used to. It is really being in constant interaction with real other people in the entire world, and people have found that they're able to express themselves in more aggressive ways and open ways that they cannot do it in face-to-face interaction. What I suggest, Abuna, is I don't know if George is doing this or not, but to actually become part of our children's games. So if I'm controlling from the outside, it will always feel that I'm the policing, I'm policing it. But if I become part of it, I play with them some of their games, as long as they're, obviously I had to screen with them their games to start. I don't turn a blind eye when something is inappropriate, because that's the life of my children. And there is no way that I'm going to allow something that is not appropriate. So that screening done, I can get involved in their game. We can play together, and there are interactive games that adults can learn with their children and become part of it, and that also creates a nice bond with them.
Absolutely.
Also include. Sorry, George.
So no, forgive me.
Also include other activities. Maybe take them out and play outside for a little bit, or go for walks, as we said earlier, or have a basketball net in the driveway if that's possible. Maybe some people do not have that ability to have a basketball outside. Give them responsibility in the house that they enjoy doing. There are certain responsibility that they like on the computer. So I've got a few of our youth, for example, they do production to my videos. No, I don't. They've done so much with that, and I know OTSAC have been doing this for a very long time. Have been advising this for a very long time until COVID-19 happened, and the talents of youth. I've discovered an artist amongst our youth. You know, we keep asking who can do a flyer here and there, and now we've discovered some amazing talent. And some of the youth, Abuna, they call me and say, Abuna, do you have something for me today? And I say, yes. They say, thank God you have something for me today, because otherwise they're bored. So again, using their computer and internet, you know, skills. But on the other hand, Abuna, there are some people who are playing 5 to 8 hours of gaming every day. This addiction needs help. This is not something that can be controlled by simply taking away the nets. They become very aggressive. They can actually raise a knife against their parents. They can go and hit the wall. These are all signs of a true addiction. And in cases like that, Abuna, they definitely need to see a counselor who specializes in addictions and cyber addiction specifically.
I enjoyed the discussion so much. Thank you very much, my dear beloved Abuna Bishoy. Thank you, my dear beloved son George. Just sharing now the screen. We are so happy to see you, Abuna.
Thank you, Abuna. يعني I was enjoying, بس كنت expecting إن OTSAC اللي بتanswer. يعني
No.
No, يا Abuna.
I
We
talked
didn't
so
get used in it to invite anyone to answer the question.
No, I'm so happy.
To enjoy your answers for all the questions, either counseling, either apologetics.
أنا كان نفسي أشتغل مذيع وما نجحتش، فيعني سيبني أعمل الشغلة دي.
لا، ما احنا فاكرين قدسك يعني اشتغلت مع سيدنا البابا شنودة.
لا العفو.
ده كان great blessing يعني اللي قدسك
تعيش يا ابونا تعيش. لا أنا صدقني استفدت جدا من قدس أبونا بشوي وجورج يعني هم يقدروا كده يكونوا غطوا أكتر من 10 موضوعات مهمة جدا للناس كلها وللشباب وللفاميليز. يعني I'm really satisfied يعني.
بص يا ابونا، يعني عايز اقول لقدسك على حاجه. احنا يعني مع كل الديزاستر اللي موجوده مع الكوفيد 19 we never imagine ان احنا to miss يعني المؤتمر بتاع قدسك.
تعيش
عشان كده قعدنا to think وقلنا المؤتمر يعني بنعمه ربنا وبمحبه ابونا هيتعمل. فيعني احنا الحقيقه يعني بنشكر قدسك كتير خالص على محبتك وتعبك واحتمالك وطول اناتك وصبرك.
العفو يا ابونا، ده بركه ليا.
يعني تعيش يا ابونا وتخدم، وربنا يحافظ عليك للكنيسه كلها.
تعيش يا ابونا تعيش.
من زي ما بيقولوا كده من اقصى المسكونه الى اقصيها.
ربنا يحميك يا ابونا.
تعيش، ربنا
يخليك لينا على
لينا
محبتك، وكفايه ان انا شايفكم قدامي ده يديني يعني طعم المؤتمر، وربنا يدينا العمر ان كان لينا عمر نشوفكم تاني بجد يعني فيس تو فيس. لكن المجموعه اللي قدسك بتشتغل بيها كمان الشباب اللي ماسكين المؤتمر بجد يعني ربنا يكافئهم على كل تعبهم. واظن ان العدد اللي هيحضروا المؤتمر هيكون السنه دي اكتر من كل سنه.
لا ده 3-4 اضعاف لغايه دلوقتي.
اشكر الله. فده برضه لوحده خير يا ابونا، ده بنعمه ربنا خير.
لا يا ابونا، بس برضه هم السنه دي هيذوقوا حلاوه المؤتمر بتاع قدسك، عشان ان شاء الله السنه الجايه تجيلنا قدسك بيرسونالي كلهم يحضروا برضه المؤتمر. فيعني من الاب والابن والروح القدس الاله الواحد امين. كل سنه وانتم طيبين. احنا دايما شهر يونيو بيبقى له مذاقه خاصه عندنا، لان احنا فيه بنحتفل بعيد شفاعنا القديس العظيم الانبا ابراهام. وزي ما الكنيسة بتسميه هو حبيب الفقراء، واحنا بنحبهم معاه. وعشان كده احنا جايين نقول لكم على خبر جميل ومفرح، وانا متأكد ان كلكم هتفرحوا بيه. احنا بنعمة ربنا هنعمل مركز للاهتمام بالأطفال في الصعيد، وسيدنا البابا سماه سانت مارك فيليج. والمكان ده هيبقى بيخدم حاجتين. الحاجة الأولانية الأطفال يجوا من كل القرى ومن كل النجوع في الصعيد، يقعدوا يقضوا ويك إند، وفي أثناء الويك إند ده هيتمتعوا بإن هم يتعلموا السيلف هايجين، يعني ياخدوا شاور ويتعلموا ازاي يعتنوا باسنانهم، ويبقى معاهم نديلهم معجون سنان وفرشة سنان، ازاي يعتنوا بشعرهم ونظافته. وفي نفس الوقت من اول ما يوصلوا هيتعطلهم ملابس جديدة خالص يغيرهم هدومهم بعد ما ياخدوا شاور، وهم راجعين هياخدوا شنطة فيها ملابس جديدة كاملة. الحاجة الثانية هيتعلموا قصص بسيطة من الكتاب المقدس، يحفظوا شوية ترانيم وألحان وبعض الآيات الكتابية. الحاجة الثالثة إنهم عندهم حاجات زي حمام السباحة أو أماكن يلعبوا فيها كورة وملاعب وحاجات زي كده، فطبعا ده نوع من الترفيه بالنسبة لهم ما بيلاقوهوش في أي حتة. النوع الثاني من اللي احنا هنخدمهم اللي هم البنات المتسربات من التعليم اللي بيسيبوا المدارس، ودول طبعا في خطورة عليهم ان هم يتخدموا بأي حد بعيد عن الكنيسة. عشان كده دول بييجوا يقعدوا مدة أطول في المكان، ويحصل برضو نفس الحاجات اللي بتتعمل مع الولاد الأولين تتعامل معاهم، بجانب إن هم يحصل نوع من الدراسة ليه هم سايبين المدارس وإيه إمكانية إن هم يرجعوا، وإن ما كانش إيه الصنعة اللي يقدروا يتعلموها علشان يقدروا إن هم يتعايشوا منها بعدين. العمل ده أو المشروع ده محتاج مساعدتكم، أولاً صلواتكم، ثانياً مساهمتكم. كل اللي احنا طالبينه عشان نبتدي، عايزين كل عيلة تقدم تبرع باسم جمعية الأنبا برام ولمشروع القرية أو منطقة الأطفال في الصعيد. وممكن كل أسرة تقدم $1000 أو أكثر. لو تحب تقدم اشتراك شهري، ابعت فويد تشيك وعليه الاماونت اللي تحب ان الجمعيه تسحبها كل شهر. لو عندك فلوس في مصر وتحب تقدم تبرع من فلوسك في مصر برضو ده ممكن، وفي كل الاحوال ديت هيتعطى ايصال للضرائب من الجمعيه لاي حد هيساهم سواء هنا او مصر. انا واثق في محبتكم وواثق في تعظيمكم، وإن شاء الله بنعمة ربنا هيتمجد وهيكمل العمل ده عشان يبقى سبب بركة وسبب فرح لأطفال كتير اللي ربنا قال عنهم إن ملائكتهم ينظرون وجه أبي الذي في السماوات. ربنا يعوضكم ويبارك حياتكم ويفرح قلبكم زي ما بتفرحهم قلب ربنا وقلب الأطفال الصغيرين. لإلهنا كل مجد وكرامة من الآن وإلى الأبد آمين.